Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the War of Ideas. Today, we have a lot on the plate. We have a longer show than usual because not only are we covering the news of the week, not only are we breaking down the fourth GOP debate and our third straight week of the best debate breakdown known to man, but we also need to talk about the fact that Alex Jones has returned, the implications that has for free speech writ large, and finally, but certainly not least, we have a very special guest today coming on in just about, let's say, 35 minutes. Mr. Harvey Silvergate, a lawyer for FIRE, a free expression organization. So we got a lot to get through. Unfortunately, because we have a guest coming, I'm not going to be able to break down in the same level of, let's say, verbosity per usual. But I think we will still find that it is the best breakdown around. So for those who don't know, the GOP had its fourth and final debate today between all of its primary candidates. They did. And this was the best one. Not going to lie to you. This was, in fact, the best one. This was immensely entertaining. I think part of it, the reason was just because we had the least amount of candidates on stage. So, we actually got to hear from people we care about. But the other reason is I think because it was the last one, nobody really gave a shit. Because none of the past ones had made the numbers move in any real way. And when that happens, people, I guess they decided, who cares, right? What do I got to lose? Because make no mistake, this debate does not matter. None of the debates have mattered because Donald Trump is ahead by 40 or 50 points. So even like if somebody had an insane 25-point jump, it still wouldn't matter. They'd still be losing by 15 points. So nonetheless, it is immensely entertaining and does give us a little bit of a window into the current public zeitgeist, let's say. We get to see what everybody's thinking and feeling and where the culture is at. And hopefully it will be a useful bellwether for the future of the GOP ideologically. So let's pop right into it.
Trump is no longer mentally fit to be president. Is that what you think?
Look, he is showing Father Time is undefeated. The idea that we're going to put someone up there that's almost 80 and there's going to be no effects from that, we all know that that's not true. We also need a president that can serve 2 terms.
Why doesn't he just answer?
So he doesn't really answer the question. Again, that's kind of smart because, if you say Trump is mentally unfit, he will go after you even harder. I guess it's like you're running for president, dude. You do have to run against the guy. And it's not like your, tippy toe strategy has really worked. This is something that Chris Christie pointed out. However, it still probably makes sense not to poke him unnecessarily. But his point about wanting to be a 2-term president, that's actually a really good argument. That's pretty safe. So, yeah. Regular politicking from DeSantis there. Normal. Good job. Per usual. Ron is just kind of solid.
So the question, is he fit?
You have your thing.
Is he fit or isn't he? No, I don't have my thing.
We don't.
He's the thing. Is he fit or isn't he?
You're
talking about him being 80 years old.
It doesn't mean that somebody couldn't get elected. That's up to the people that
Ron,
is he fit or isn't he?
All three.
Okay, so that's pretty the most chaotic. Ron is kind of answering the question. He also, this clip cuts it out, but he does say, I don't know what he would score on a test. What his real answer is I don't know, which is a pretty good idea. He's saying, I don't know. He's not as bad as Biden, but he's also 80, and that's not ideal. That's his answer. Chris Christie, because he's running on, the only guy with principles type of shtick, which is hilariously not true, but, it's his shtick. Saying that, trying to corner Ron, it's smart, and Christie does this a lot. Christie's a bit of a bulldog here. So yeah, Ron does a good job there. Pretty boring stuff, honestly. Even if it's a funny exchange, Ron's giving a very normal answer, and Chris Christie's freaking out. Ron's like, I don't know. It's not great that he's 80, and he's definitely only a 1-term president. So if he's fit or not, I don't know. But he's definitely not an ideal candidate because of his age. And Chris Christie's like, tell me whether or not you think is mentally competent right now. Which is very silly because most debate answers are somewhat avoidant. And maybe that's not ideal for Chris Christie to ask like Ron is avoiding the question more than usual here is very silly because he's not.
Of them have been licking Donald Trump's boots for years for money and endorsements.
I've got these three guys who are all.
That's very true. That's a good point, by the way. That's a critical point. Good job. It's true. Everybody on this stage at one point has really liked Donald Trump or has worked for Donald Trump or has done something for Donald Trump and is now turning on him because it's convenient for them. Very true. It was all so, Vivek pointing out that they're changing with the wind is a good move by him.
Seemingly to compete with, Voldemort, he who shall not be named. He is unfit. This is a guy who just said this past week that he wants to use the Department of Justice to go after his enemies when he gets in there.
Ambassador Haley, do you support President?
That's not actually as scary as you think it is. If you keep in mind that Trump called them his enemies, but they're not just being gone after because they are his enemies. There's, theoretically going to be a very real case that these people did in fact do something wrong or illegal. Now, if Trump does get elected and it turns out that that's not the case, then okay, Chris Christie's paranoia was right. But at this point in time, saying that he's going to persecute his political enemies just because they're enemies, regardless of any wrongdoing, which is obviously the scary implication that he wants to draw there, that's not useful. It's not a good thing to assume. Also, it would kind of be par for the course given the fact that like Biden's DOJ is like reporting on like Latin masses, and Biden's DOJ has been so obviously politically corrupt. It's kind of unbelievable. So first of all, he's not doing what Christie wants him to be doing. But even if he was, Christie should be just as scandalized, if not more so, by Joe Biden right now. So par for the course there. But nobody's really talking about Biden in this particular debate because they all know that they're not actually going to face him.
Trump's plan for ideological screening.
Well, I don't think that you have a straight-up Muslim ban as much as you look at the countries that have terrorist activity that want to hurt Americans. You can ban those people from those countries. That's the way we should look at it, is which countries are a threat to us.
You have more anti-Semitism in.
That was a good answer by Nikki Haley. And it's actually a good policy idea. On it yesterday during the final Royal Rumble, soon to be replaced by something else, very mysterious. Harris Sultan was talking about the problems that tend to arise if you have people with certain ideological commitments to radical Islam. If they get power in Western countries, what does that do to Western country policy, right? He was asking those very real questions, and Trump is asking the exact same question, is like, we should not have immigrants who hate America, actually. We should actually expect assimilation, certainly more assimilation than we have right now. We should actually make sure that the people who are going to live here actually like America and like Western civilization and like our values. That's probably a good thing to screen for. And anybody who brings up the First Amendment, it only applies to citizens. Immigrants are not citizens yet. Very silly objection. And given the fact that there is now concerns about terrorism and stuff like that, those types of concerns are on the rise, which is what Haley was really talking about. An outright Muslim ban is very silly because it's perfectly possible for someone to be a Muslim who also loves America and loves American values broadly. But some sort of ideological screening is absolutely a good idea. Country by country bans should be like that. That seems kind of weird. It would only make sense if it was a temporary thing. I think Trump did that at one point. But like long-term country bans is very silly unless you have really good evidence for it. But ideological screening is absolutely a good idea.
Germany than at any time since Adolf Hitler. Why? Because they imported mass numbers of people who reject their culture. Europe is committing suicide with the mass migration, and it's illegal and legal. Nikki Haley said the other day there should be no limits on legal immigration, and that corporate CEOs should set the policy on that. There needs to be limits on immigration.
You called Nikki Haley.
So I don't know if that was true or not. I don't. Call me biased. I don't think Ron was saying that because it's not true. It would be very shocking to me. Ron DeSantis is kind of very boring and solid. And by the way, his answer there is absolutely correct. Again, if you import tons of people into your country who don't like your country or have allegiances to values or civilizations and that are other than yours, right? I forget I think it was Pat Buchanan talked about the problem with hyphenated Americans, Italian American, Scottish American, whatever. The problem with that idea is that it puts something before America. obviously he's using a figure of speech, but this is an issue. You should not be importing people, certainly not in mass, into your country if those people don't value your country and the values of said country higher than anything else. Multiculturalism is good in some respects, in limited capacities. But if your multiculturalism is to the point where people value their cultures over the culture of the country that they're immigrating to, that's a problem. DeSantis is absolutely right. It's essentially civilizational suicide. So good answer there by Ron. Whether or not Nikki Haley said no restrictions on legal immigration, I'm sure it was an edge case. I don't know the quote. I'm sure it was interpretable either way. I don't know how Haley meant it. I kind of doubt she meant no immigration. I'm sure Ron was just taking advantage of a vagary in her speech to bonk her on the head, which isn't the best. It's not very good, but it's kind of par for the course with debates. And in terms of this debate, it was tame. So we'll see how much we show here.
Corrupt accused Ron DeSantis of wearing high heels and told Ambassador Haley she should keep a closer eye on her daughter. Can you see how this has led some to conclude you are not, in fact, a unifier?
Megyn Kelly did a fantastic job moderating this debate, by the way. She's the best so far that I've seen. She did a very good job. She asked good questions.
And to question your authenticity.
Megyn, I think there's a time and place for everything. We need somebody in the White House who absolutely is going to be a fighter when it counts. And I did say that there were some good people on that stage in that third debate. Doug Burgum was on that stage at that time.
This administration is trying to hobble.
Doug Burgum was a candidate who had no chance, who paid people essentially to donate to him so he could get on the stage. So that's Vivek not answering. That's Vivek saying yes, basically. Vivek is saying, yeah, I'm not a unifier. I'm a fighter. I don't want to unify with bad ideas. I want to fight for good ideas, was basically what he was saying. Actually, that would be a very good way to phrase it. Maybe I should run. Who knows? No, definitely not. But yeah, good way of answering the question. I think this was just included by Politico to just highlight the idea that Vivek says mean stuff.
Israel from being able to defend itself. They have a right to eliminate Hamas and win a total and complete victory so that they never have to deal with this again. Joe Biden will say they support Israel, and then they do nothing but try to kneecap them every step of the way. We also need to look at what's the underlying problem here. Iran. Biden is doing nothing to bring Iran to account. You got to turn the screws on them. Don't let them have any oil revenue. The money they get, they send to Hamas, they send to Hezbollah, and they foment jihad throughout the Middle East.
I dealt with
This was the most serious part of the debate, unironically. The fact, there's been a problem in the last couple of debates is that they've been talking about foreign policy too much. I think they struck a decent balance this time. But I will say that this section was probably the most serious section. I thought that I don't really have anything to say for Ron there. I think it's pretty solid. How he thinks that Biden is kneecapping Israel, I'm not quite sure. I don't know what he's referring to. I thought Biden's actually been okay. Obviously, the fact he freed up funds for the mullahs is horrible, but that was before. So I actually don't know what he's referring to there. Maybe I think Biden started making the funds conditional recently. That they want to start to steer Israeli policy. That's not a problem to me. If the U.S. is bankrolling somebody, they should absolutely have a role in deciding how that money gets used, and what the policy of the donee recipient country is. So if that's what DeSantis is referring to, that's actually a miss by DeSantis. I don't think that's the problem that he thinks it is. The U.S. actually voted against a ceasefire recently in the UN, so again, it doesn't seem like they're kneecapping too hard. So I'm not really sure what DeSantis is referring to there.
Iran every day when I was at the United Nations, and they only respond to strength. You've got to punch them hard, and let them know that. All of the 7 or 8 million illegals that have come under Biden's watch absolutely have to go back.
Yeah, Nikki Haley is a Hawks hawk, man. You got to hit them hard so they know better. We all knew that Haley was a bit more hawkish than the rest, but I will say that this debate overall, and you might not see it in the clips, you should just go watch the whole thing. I think it's available on Rumble. I'm not sure, though. In this debate, whether she wants it or not, she definitely kind of distinguished herself as the hawkish establishment candidate, which means she has no chance anymore. Certainly not against Trump. So, Interesting there. But her idea about literally all of the illegal immigrants being mass deported, literally all of them, that's pretty strong. That's strong business from Haley. So, I guess you get hawkism, I suppose, applies foreignly and domestically. Foreignly?
Those that have been here longer than that, we've got to start seeing who is it, how long have they been here, have they been vetted, have they paid taxes, have they been working, and figure out who else is out there.
You'll all be
That's boring. Again, this section is boring too because they mostly all agree about border security. So boring.
heading to the polls
That doesn't mean bad, but it does mean boring.
to vote. And that's something that Donald Trump will not be able to do because he will be convicted of felonies before then, and his right to vote will be taken away.
This is not useful. Chris Christie, I said this on the Rumble yesterday. He is like a Sith Lord. He is fueled by hatred. The only reason he is on that stage is because he just wants to be the anti-Trump guy. He just wants to go after Trump as hard as he can, as sharp as he can. Chris Christie has to know he doesn't have a chance. Like, he has to know that the Chrisissance, which we all pray for ultimately, is ultimately just a meme, right? Like, he has to know. I think he's just there. He's just fueled by hatred. And honestly, it's kind of fun. So, not hating the guy too bad. Although he did have some pretty atrocious takes here. They're not in the clips. Politico isn't picking the best clips for me, unfortunately.
You can boo about.
To my point, this isn't helpful. Like, right, this doesn't do anything. Saying Trump won't be able to vote for himself because he's going to be in jail. Like, there's a better way to phrase that that's actually useful, which is that Trump might not be able to win because he's in jail, or because he's got convicted, right? But he's just kind of framing this in like the most kind of aggravating way possible because that's what he wants to do, like, personally, not because like that's actually super useful for him electorally. I think it's quite counterproductive, actually. So, I respect the double down. I have to say, I do respect the commitment, but probably not the best strategy in the world.
About it all you like and continue to deny reality. But if we deny reality as a party, we're going to have 4 more years of Joe Biden.
Yeah, those clips were kind of lame. I'm not gonna lie. I am not gonna lie to you. Those are some lame clips. See if we can find something better. We will talk about Alex Jones at some point. That's horrible. We will talk about Alex. Not fun.
I look at my watch now. We're 17 minutes into this debate, and except for your little, the fifth guy, for your little speech in the beginning, we've had these
clip that I'm looking for in this highlight reel. Then I'm just gonna tell you because it's hilarious.
3 acting as if the race is between the 4 of us. The fifth guy, who doesn't have the guts to show up and stand here, he's the one who, as you just put it, is way ahead in the polls. And yet I've got these 3 guys who are all seemingly to compete with, Voldemort, he who shall not be named. They don't want to talk about it.
You seem to be.
I mean, so this is the type of attack that's actually kind of useful, right? There are 2 different types of anti-Trump attacks. The one we saw earlier was like phrased poorly. It was just kind of like rage. But that's a good point. The point that the debate is kind of pointless and that they should all just be attacking Trump and trying to bring him down. That's true, and it's a good look for him because it's actually a substantive attack on Trump, saying that Trump didn't show up to the debate and that's like cowardly or whatever. And then also attacking the other people on stage as cowards. That is an actual useful one. Now, it doesn't work, and Chris Christie's in the last place, so he has no real position to say this or anything. But this is the type of anti-Trump attack that's actually at least theoretically effective, although ultimately nothing's going to stop him.
Be saying Donald Trump is no longer mentally fit to be president. Is that what you think?
Look, he is showing Father Time is undefeated. Yep. The idea that we're going to put someone up there that's almost 80 and there's going to be no effects from that, we all know that that's not true. And so we have an opportunity to.
Again, like, DeSantis is smart because he does this sideways, right? He's not saying Trump in particular is mentally unfit. He's saying anybody who is Trump age is not ideal. So, kind of doing like the side swipe is very smart in terms of a way to attack him without being overly abrasive to his base. Again, ultimately, it's a failing strategy. Ultimately, it's not going to work. DeSantis being in the middle, being like the tougher, more disciplined Trump, he thought would give him universal appeal. In fact, it's done the opposite. It's given him universal repulsion. What's actually happened is that he's not going to out-Trump Trump. Everybody likes Trump better than they like DeSantis if you're a Trump guy. And the people who are establishment notice that DeSantis has a lot of Trump-like policies, and they don't like that either. So really, instead of having broad appeal, he's just had broad just repulsion. It's just not worked for him, unfortunately. He really should have just waited. Him running was a massive mistake.
To do a next generation of leaders and really be able to move this country forward. We also need a president that can serve 2 terms. I don't think Donald Trump, I think he's going to have, I don't think he'd be able to get elected. The Democrats want him to be the nominee. We see that. They are going to turn the screws the minute, if he got the nomination,
But do you think he's
you're going to see
mentally
it.
fit?
That is true. It does. Biden's only running because he's running against Trump. That's true, because the Dems think that Trump is easier to beat. And the reason for that is because sometimes you vote for the Democrat, not because you like the Democrat, but just because you hate Trump so much. He has that kind of repulsion effect on some people as well that will drive people to the polls. Now, whether or not the Democrats are right about that is an open question. I think there's a good case that they're wrong. I think Trump has a really good shot right about now. If the election was held today, I think I'd bet a small amount on Trump. But he is right is what the Democrats want. Whether or not the Democrats are right is the real question.
Isn't he just answer the question? The question was very direct. Is he fit to be president or isn't he? The rest of the speech is interesting, but completely non-responsive.
Not completely non-responsive. That's stupid. That's not true. He said 2 things why he doesn't think Trump should be like the guy. And one of them is age, which is tangentially responsive. It's just not directly responsive because not everybody has a hate boner for Trump like you do, Christy. But again, we already talked about this. We talked about Christie's hatred flowing through him, right? Half this highlight reel is caught up by this. Everybody really loves this moment. I think that it keeps getting highlighted just because like they're trying to like, make DeSantis look bad, and this was the clip that made him look bad. I don't see it this way, but I guess the highlight reel people saw it this way.
She's been very weak on China. Now, here's the problem. The rhetoric is different, but her donors, these Wall Street liberal donors, they make money in China. They are not going to let her be tough on China, and she will cave to the donors. She will not stand up for you.
15 seconds, Ambassador.
So Vivek was doing this too. Again, we'll see if they'll play the clip. But going after Haley for being corrupt in some way has been the move for whatever reason. I don't think that's a good move. I think just I don't like her policies. I always just prefer I hate your policies as opposed to you're corrupt generally. Because who cares if you're corrupt if your policies are good, right? Like, I mean, that's a very Machiavellian point. Of course, everybody cares to some extent, but like ultimately, like your motives don't affect me. Your policies do. That's what I care about primarily. Obviously, corruption is not great, but whatever.
First of all, he's mad because those Wall Street donors used to support him and now they support me.
I mean,
That's insane. That's an insane hold on. Let's do that again. Let's do that again for a second.
donor. She will not stand up for you.
15 seconds, Ambassador.
First of all, he's mad because those Wall Street donors used to support him and now they support me.
That's an insane response. You know why? Because that's not a response. That is not saying I'm not corrupt or that I'm not backed by liberal Wall Street donors. That's you're jealous. You wish you could have it. That's a basic, like, you're not defending yourself there. Like, you're just, that's almost an admittance. That's a horrible response. Nikki Haley does take the crown, the War of Ideas crown for having the worst responses. Like, everybody else has done bad, but Haley has done bad stuff, but Haley has consistently the most insane statements. We had a lot of them last round, but this was another one. That's insane. That's like, you're not even defending yourself. What are you doing? Wild.
I mean, Nick, if you can't tell the difference between where Israel is and the U.S. is on a map, I can have my 3-year-old son show you the difference.
He has.
So that was actually decent because it's caustic and it's biting and, like, it's overly personal, okay, because it's Vivek. But also that's an actual policy thing. He's saying that. So for context, Haley claimed that an attack on Israel is an attack on America. And so, Nikki, Vivek rammed him for that. Vivek rammed him for that, naturally, and it's actually a policy response, right? So that's convenient. Let's close out. Our guest is actually here, waiting in the wings, and we'll bring him on in a second. So let's just fill out the rest of this highlight reel, and then we'll move on. Maybe we'll cover Alex Jones next.
Nikki Haley's basic intelligence, not her positions, her basic intelligence. She doesn't know regions. She wouldn't be able to find something on a map that his 3-year-old could find. Look, if you want to disagree on issues, that's fine. And Nikki and I disagree on some issues. What we don't disagree on is this is a smart, accomplished woman, and you should stop insulting her.
This was very weird. This was a weird part of the debate. He white knights for Nikki Haley. I don't know why. I don't understand it. I don't understand the strategy at all. Perhaps there was no strategy. But we have more important matters to attend to currently. We are joined by Mr. Harvey Silvergate. Thank you for coming on, Mr. Silvergate. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So Mr. Silvergate is a top lawyer for FIRE. It's an organization, to the best of my knowledge, fights for free expression on college campuses, something that I recently have had a lot of experience with. You all are doing fantastic work. So just to start, could you tell us a little bit more about who you are and how you got involved in FIRE?
Well, who I am, that's an open-ended question.
That's kind of question.
Okay. I graduated from the Harvard Law School in 1967 and was going to move back to my native New York to practice, but I fell in love with a woman who was native to Cambridge, and I decided to take the Massachusetts bar, and I stayed in Cambridge. We did eventually get married, and I have one son who lives in New York City with his wife and 2 children. So here I am in Cambridge, one of the many people in Cambridge, I think, with a Brooklyn accent. And I got involved early in my career representing students and professors who were put upon by college administrators. And so that's one of my specialties. I'm also a general criminal defense lawyer, and I'm a civil liberties lawyer with an emphasis in free speech cases. Now, FIRE, here's what happened. In 1998, I published a book with a co-author with a Princeton classmate of mine, Alan Charles Kors, a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, just recently retired. It was called The Shadow University, The Betrayal of Liberty on America's Campuses. And it was about mostly administrators, college administrators, who were squelching dissenting speech by enacting speech codes, establishing these kangaroo courts to try them where nobody, it's sort of like a court in Russia now, nobody gets acquitted. I started, so I had a specialty going in that field. And eventually it became a very substantial part of my practice. But
what do you mean specialty? How could a lawyer be involved in internal university courts, right?
The way you do it, you're not allowed to appear with the student at the hearing. But what you do is, before the hearing, you negotiate with general counsel. It's lawyer to lawyer. I'm not allowed to deal with their professors, their administrators, but I am allowed to deal with their general counsel, their lawyers, in which I protest the kangaroo court nature of the hearings. And because they're afraid of being sued, I generally can get a fairer hearing from the kangaroo court than ordinary kangaroo can.
Okay, I understand. Okay, very cool. And so FIRE grew out of this. Is that
Yeah, so what happened was Kors and I published The Shadow University. That was 1998. Immediately, we started getting phone calls and frantic letters from, this is, I believe, before email. So we were getting frantic letters from students who were being tried in these kangaroo courts. They wanted help. And of course, I was very limited. I was only one lawyer. Kors was not a lawyer. So we immediately started this foundation to try to provide legal assistance to students and faculty members who were put upon by these unfair tribunals run by the academic bureaucrats. We started out with 2 volunteers, Alan Charles Kors and me. We and one executive director who was paid, and I thought the problem would go out, we would go out of business in something like 10, 15 years, because in my view, the problem of this kind of conduct on liberal arts campuses was so crazy and so dissonant that I thought we would be able to solve the problem easily. Turned out I was wrong. It's a deeply entrenched problem now. Fire now has about 130 full-time employees. It changed its name earlier last year to the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, so that it could take cases, free speech cases, off of the college campus, outside in what's called the real world. So it's grown considerably. And meanwhile, the problem is still with us. It's quite amazing to have censorship in liberal arts campuses. It's just dissonant.
So I got a million questions. I guess the first one is, back in the 1990s when this first started, you said that you saw censorship back then. Now, censorship now is something I'm quite familiar with. I'm kind of curious, what kind of stuff were you seeing get put upon in the 1990s? What types of ideas? Like, what kind of cases were you seeing?
Well, it's not all that different now than it was then, and I'll tell you exactly what rankled them the most. They didn't like any speech that would upset members of certain minority groups, racial minority groups in particular African Americans. And they didn't like any language that would upset women, whom they viewed rather oddly, as sort of more tender and delicate than men. So if a woman called a male a name, that would not be a case. But if a man called a woman a name, that would be a case. Or sexual assault. They were very big on sexual assault. If a couple had sexual relations for months, and then all of a sudden the woman got mad at the man for some reason, she would claim that despite the fact that they had intercourse, 50 or 60 times in the last year, suddenly she said, "Oh, but this time I didn't give my consent," and he was guilty of sexual assault. And the dean, really apparently unaware of human behavior, would file a sexual assault complaint against the male. So these are crazy cases. It's still going on, and it gets worse and worse because they keep adding more deans, and the deans need something to do, so they prosecute and persecute students. Do you know that there are more deans in American higher education than there are professors?
I knew administrative bloat was a thing, but I didn't know it was to that extent.
It is that bad. Yep, it is that bad.
God. I guess, yeah, idle hands, devil's plaything, I suppose, like you said. So
I have proposed firing 95% of them and reducing tuition by 40%.
I like that plan.
It would improve campus culture as well.
So, yeah, you said it was deeply entrenched in these universities. Do you think that is just because of administrative bloat, or where is this coming from? I guess that's the $1 billion question, but you're one of the best people to answer it. So where do you think this is coming from? Where is the desire for this type of limitation on expression? Where do you think that's coming from?
Well, it's sort of a self-perpetuating thing on the campuses. The professoriate lost control of higher education a long time ago and turned it over to administrators. And the administrators have turned out to be occupiers, and they have changed the nature and the culture of these institutions. The big fight is to restore liberal arts colleges as liberal arts colleges rather than as reform schools. and we're fighting that battle. We have quite a few professors who agree with us. At Harvard, the professors have formed an alliance for free speech,
Mm.
um, and it's growing every week. You might say there's a counter revolution brewing.
Oh, that's lovely to hear.
Yeah.
What does that look like? So I guess my first question, actually, just to set the scene for people who don't know, is FIRE a partisan organization,
No,
or
not at all. Not at all.
at all?
When we started out, most of our clients were on the left of the political spectrum, and they were persecuted by the people on the right who ran the colleges back then. Then there was a shift, and now the campuses are overwhelmingly progressive. Mind you, I use the word progressive, not liberal. Liberals are people on the left who believe in civil liberties. Progressives are people on the left who don't. And so now it's the conservatives who are getting pummeled.
Mhm.
But also, non-conservative faculty members have problems, and non-conservative um, students have problems. I mean,
How
there's
so?
they really pick on. In order to have something to do, it's very easy for a student to get charged on the basis of very flimsy complaints, and also if you if you engage in a political demonstration, they claim that you crossed the line of legal advocacy. They can charge you with riot. They can charge you with disorderly conduct, the academic equivalent of disorderly conduct. So
Mhm.
these have become like reform schools. It's really quite terrible. Um, I have ran as a petition candidate twice for the Board of Overseers. The first time I did it, I actually got enough signatures. I needed about 350 signatures of Harvard alumni in order to get on the ballot. I easily got on the ballot,
Mhm.
and I almost won a seat. And I would have won the seat, except that the Harvard Alumni magazine, the Harvard Alumni Bulletin,
Yeah.
sent out a description of all of the platforms of the various officially nominated candidates. They wouldn't send mine out because they said I wasn't officially nominated. So
Mm.
that they put their thumb on the scale, and
Yeah.
even then I almost won. The next year, they enlarged the number of petition signatures that I needed to get on the
Right.
ballot from 350 to 3,500. That was in
That'll
order.
do it. Yeah.
That's what I call candidate suppression, Harvard style.
Yeah.
So I was unable to, when I ran 2 or 3 years ago, I was unable to get the 3,500 signatures.
And this is just coming from ideological commitments from administration. Has that been your read?
Well, it's partly ideological. These are all progressives. The campus is way on the left now. I'm a liberal. I'm on the left, but I'm from the civil libertarian liberal
Mhm.
faction. It's partly that. It's partly just they're making a good living, and there are more of them every year, um, and they need something to do, so they persecute.
Well, you
It's
do want 95% of them fired, so the fact they put their thumb on the scale isn't exactly a surprise, I suppose. Um, so you also you said some. So we've been talking about accusations quite a bit. I'm curious. Besides your example of accusations against the sexual assault allegations. What examples have you seen of types of speech that have gotten punished? I'm kind of curious because you hear stories and you hear rumors, but you're probably one of the best qualified people in the world to tell us what's actually going on. So, what type of speech have you seen punished or attempted to be punished?
okay. Now, for example, the notion that they have is that they have to protect members of minority groups from, in their terms, being harassed. How would you harass somebody? You call them a name, a racial epithet, a religious epithet, a gender based epithet, a sexual orientation epithet. So if you have a gay student and you call that person a fag, that is considered a violation. Now, in the US Supreme Court would say, no, it's free speech. You can call people all kinds of nasty names. And that's the First Amendment. we usually end up winning these cases, even if we have to end up going to court, because these institutions, the public institutions, are bound by constitutional principles. The private institutions promise free speech, so they're bound by their own contractual
Right.
promise.
Right.
So we usually win them. But do you know how long it takes and how expensive it is to go to court? So it's a constant battle. Mind you, we win all the time, just about. I mean,
The process is the punishment to some extent.
yeah, the punishment is the process.
Yeah, yeah. So is that usually what you see? Is the majority of your caseload just epithets and whatever, that sort of thing?
Well,
Slurs?
I'm a criminal lawyer. I represent people who commit real crimes.
Yeah.
I'm that's my main thing. But in the, the academic side, we lose very few cases, but we do have to take some of them to court.
Right. And are the majority of your cases on the academic side, would you say that they are those types of epithets, or do you see just regular political speech attacked? Or I'm just curious if
Well, their
that's
definition of their definition
yeah,
of
like,
politi-
because again, like in the news, what they tell you is that it's like holding up a sign with a political opinion or
yes.
something. So if that's not the case, I would love to know.
Well, that is the case.
Oh, okay.
Because they make the assumption that members of certain minority groups are tender flowers and they easily wilt. This is not true. So if you call somebody a name, or you make some, even some outrageous criticism of their ethnic group, or of their family, uh, you can, or their religion, uh, you can be prosecuted for what's called hate speech.
Mm.
Now, hate speech is fully constitutionally protected in the real world. But on the academia, they consider their students to be tender little flowers and that would wilt as soon as they're called a name. And
Is that a bad thing?
yeah, and that's so you have this constant process of persecuting students for insulting another student on the basis of, say, gender or race, ethnicity, or national origin.
Mm.
And you sometimes can talk the general counsel into intervening, but if you can't, you have to go to court, and it's an arduous, expensive process.
And so in court, as you say, for public schools, you just appeal to the First Amendment, and for private schools, you appeal to the internal promise of free speech.
Yes,
Doesn't seem
and mind you,
right.
because they take so much federal money, there's a very good argument that they're bound by the First Amendment as well, because there's federal involvement in the running of the school. The
Right.
reason they need so much federal money, of course, is because they have all the bureaucrats. It's a vicious circle.
So you also mentioned that there are professors who are getting together and staging what you said was a counter revolution.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions there. One, what are the professors' grievances at this point? Because I don't imagine that professors are shouting racial epithets regularly. So that I guess that's question one, and I'll save question two for a second. What are professor grievances typically?
The problem is that professors are also the subject of these prosecutions on campus. If a professor uses a word, or a racial epithet, even if it's in discussion, for example, you're not allowed to say nigger. You have to say the N word. So if there's a course in racial relations, the professor cannot use this common nasty racial epithet, even in a classroom. He has
Right.
to use a disguise, the N word. There was a very famous American comedian named Lenny Bruce. I don't know if you've heard of Lenny
Rings
Bruce.
a bell.
He died a few years ago. He was a free speech absolutist, and he had a nightclub act that was very famous. He would come out on the stage, he would look out on the audience, and he'd say, "Wow, this is a diverse audience." He was making fun of the diversity and inclusion business. He said, There's a spick, which is a nasty word for a Spanish-speaking person. There's a wop, which was an insult for Italians, right? There's
Yeah.
a nigger, that was for black. There's a kike, which is a nasty word for Jews. And he would go through, and of course, then the audience, which was first very uncomfortable as he was doing this, realized the point of his routine. They're only words, words can't kill you. And he's very famous free speech absolutist on the comedy circuit.
Yeah, so again, you've mentioned this a couple of times. I think it's interesting, this idea that universities are being overly protective of their students.
Yeah.
So aside from, just the legal standards that they're violating or internally contradicting, what do you think how do you think that these policies impact students? What do you think happens when students on a long enough timeline do this?
Well, what they do is they make the students feel that you really can say what's on your mind. And that, of course, is a lesson that gets learned for using it out in the real world after you graduate. And it's very bad for the whole society to think that you have to be bound by the politeness in how you speak. Sometimes you want to be polite, but you don't always want to be polite. Sometimes you get angry. And you don't want to have to mince your words and to censor yourself all the time. And besides, if you can't use the language you want, you can't make the points that you want. There are some things that just require stronger language. And besides, in a free society, you do insult people. You have to, because it's, especially the United States, which is such a diverse society. People are different. People believe different things. And if you have to mince your words and constantly, if I say this, is this person going to get upset? You can't express yourself.
There's a great quote. I'm forgetting who said it, but it's it's recent though, and the idea is essentially, in order to be able to think honestly, you have to risk offending people, because you have to risk disagreeing with people. I guess my question is, my experiences has been that the university standards for what qualifies as offensive. So not only is it racial epithets, just the standard for what qualifies as offensive enough to be a problem has been drastically lowered. Has that been your experience as well?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, just wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy there. The second part about the counter revolution I wanted to ask about is, what does that actually look like, right? Because if there's the administrative state outnumber state, if the administrators and the deans outnumber professors, what does a counter revolution possibly look like? Who cares that a few professors got together and decided that they want more free expression?
Well,
What
what we're hoping to
like
what
here?
we're hoping to do is, first of all, influence alumni whose donations support these institutions. Number one. Number two, we are hoping to make it clear to the people who run these places that, to the extent that universities have elected boards, that we're going to run candidates who believe in free speech and academic freedom against them and get them unelected. We also, publicity is a really potent tool,
Right.
because they like to do things in the dark corners. But when the newspaper has a headline the next day about some idiotic prosecution of somebody for speech, the administrators, that's the easiest way to win a case, is to get it covered in the newspaper or on television. However, so they sunlight. One of the chapters of the Shadow University is called "Sunlight is the Best Disinfectant,"
Yep.
and that really works.
Think so. So universities have gone away from stuff once they've had a whole lot of bad press. Is there a
Yes,
record
if,
that
if if a case is covered in the press, some, like, the president of the place, or the chief fundraiser on the campus, will say, "Hey, cool it. This is not doing us any good," and suddenly
do you
you
think
win the
that will
case.
keep being effective? As some of these ideas about sensitivity and basic and hate speech, as these ideas kind of become more mainstream, do you think press is going to continue to be a disincentive, as opposed to universities just doubling down?
I do, because what happens is the governing boards start hearing about these cases.
Mhm.
And I had a case at Columbia University about 20 years ago representing a professor who was being hounded by the deans. And it was a ridiculous case. And I couldn't make any headway. I went to the general counsel, and the general counsel said, "I'm not going to interfere with this. They have, let them do what they do." So I wrote a letter to every member of Columbia's governing board. Now, that is an ethical violation, because I'm supposed to only deal with Columbia's lawyer, not with the administrators or the board members. But I said, screw it. This is they're violating their principles of academic freedom, so I'm going to take a chance. And I directly wrote to the members of the board. When the general counsel found out about it, he said, "I'm going to file an ethics complaint against you in Massachusetts." I said, "Go right ahead. I think I can defend myself in this particular case, because you were so unethical in the way you handled this." But then the next day, I got a phone call from the chairman of the board saying, "Mr. Silverglade, thanks for letting us know. I've already reprimanded the administrator, and your client has been exonerated." So it worked. That proves that the governing boards do not know what the hell is going on in their own campuses.
So, two questions now. First of all, why do you think that governing boards tend to be sympathetic towards you as opposed to believing the same stuff that their deans do? And second, how can they be this ignorant? Like, this is mainstream news that college campuses are really bad for free expression.
Well,
How can governing boards be ignorant of this kind of
what's
stuff?
happened is the governing boards have gotten worse over the last 20 years. Back in the early days of this phenomenon, which is what my Columbia case was in the earlier days of the phenomenon, and the governing boards were more into the precepts of liberal arts education. But now, let me tell you another story. I told you that I ran for the Board of Overseers. Harvard is governed by a two-tier system. The real power is in the hands of what's called the Harvard Corporation. The technical term is the president and fellows of Harvard College. They have life tenure, and when the one member either dies or resigns, the rest of them elect his or her successor. There's a secondary group called the Board of Overseers that has significant power, but not the kind of power that the corporation has. That's the one that I ran for, and that they tried to keep me off of.
Right.
But my assumption was that I could talk to the members of the board and convince them of the importance on a liberal arts campus of free speech and due process, and tell them the stories, because I get all the stories about what's really going on. So I would be their conduit. I would educate them as to what's going on their own campus that they are ignorant of. I think one of the solutions now even is to let them know what is going on, so that they know what the problems are, communicating directly with the governing boards.
Right, but how do they not know already, right? Like, how are they in the dark about this? I don't really understand that.
Well, I'll tell you what. There's a scandal going on now with Harvard's president. You may have heard about
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I heard something.
Okay, now the
For
governing board.
those who don't know, sorry, I realize we do have an audience. For those who don't know, a few university presidents went in front of Congress. They were asked if calling for the genocide of Jews qualifies as harassment, and none of them really gave a straight yes.
Yeah.
One of those
And had they had any integrity, and had they been fully informed, they would have said that they would have, and this is, by the way, the current state of free speech law under the Supreme Court. It hasn't changed in the last 50 years. You can call for genocide of any group that you want. That's protected. If you take affirmative steps toward accomplishing it, that's a crime. But mere speech is protected. So those students, the pro-Palestinian protesters who were calling for genocide, they were protected, fully protected constitutionally. And um, the Claudine Gay, the president of Harvard, tried to explain that to Stefanik, and then her committee, but couldn't articulate. It was amazing. I was listening to this, thinking to myself, "This is first year law school stuff." Um,
Yeah.
and she couldn't articulate it, and neither could the president of Penn, and neither could the president.
President Penn resigned,
Yeah,
right?
see, what they did was they had a little speech written out, I'm sure, by general counsel, and they kept reiterating and regurgitating the same, and it wasn't answering Stefanik's question. And Stefanik was no help. She would say, "Don't explain, just give me a yes or no." Well, these are complicated, nuanced issues. You can't answer yes or no. And in a way, the two sides deserved each other in this hearing.
Yeah, I guess one of my to push back on that like a little bit isn't it's somewhat self-contradictory, right? Because if they have harassment guidelines around, wilting flower protections for people on other things, but are sticking only to the broadest possible First Amendment protections on this issue, that's somewhat of a problem, is it not?
Well, yes. You're talking about double standards, which is an
Yeah,
old problem.
which is no standard at all.
Which is no standard at all. Yes,
Yeah.
gives you
Uh,
no guidance.
yeah. Um, we say congratulations. Now, okay, great. Glad you have a free speech standard on this issue. Now apply it to the other issues, please. I guess would be the response. Yeah, no, that have you been getting a lot of cases like that recently at Fire about the Israel Palestine conflict?
Oh yeah, fire gets a constant inflow
Both sides, you think, or
of what?
both sides, or mostly pro Palestine people getting in trouble? Would you say?
Oh, it's right now on the campuses. It's mostly the pro-Palestine people who are getting in trouble,
Yeah.
because there have been some death threats, and that is a different
Well,
category. That's a
yeah,
different category.
that's something else. Yeah.
You can say to somebody, "I wish you would drop dead." You can say that. You could also say to a person, "Drop dead." But what you can't say is, "I'm going to kill you."
Right. I'm gonna make you.
That's an illegal threat.
Yeah. Yeah. Little gradations there, but they matter. They certainly matter.
They they certainly matter. Words matter.
Are you optimistic? Do you think? More free speech protections are in the future?
I do, because there's a counter revolution brewing. I can feel it. Mind you, I live in Cambridge. I'm a 10-minute walk, and I have my home office. This is where I spend 90% of my time practicing law. This is my third floor of my home has been converted. I have two offices for research assistants on my right and my left. This is where I am. I see clients here, and I have an office in Boston, which I really have to go to because this is perfectly adequate. Um, and I live a 5-minute walk from Harvard and a 25-minute walk from MIT. We're in the middle of two major academic institutions. There are
Yeah.
110. There are 110,000 residents of Cambridge, and there are 100,000 students, which means there's basically one student for every resident of Cambridge. This is a real college town, and it's imbued with. I live at the Harvard end rather than the MIT end, but it's the whole city that's imbued by academia. And so this is sort of the ground zero for the war. And so I get a lot of information, a lot of intelligence about what's going on. And I am optimistic because I think that the hypocrisy of colleges that claim to offer free speech and academic freedom and then prosecute and persecute people for taking that promise seriously is so ridiculous, both legally, ethically, and rationally, that I think they're going to end up losing. We are going to prevail. I'm very optimistic that we're going to prevail.
Well, I'm happy that you're happy. I'm happy you're optimistic because for the layman who doesn't have that access to that kind of intelligence, things seem bad and they don't seem like they're getting better. So, what would you say?
Things are very bad. The
For,
things are very bad. But it is the very badness of it that is starting to wake people up.
Mm,
So, you know, um, that has happened. That's how counter revolutions start. Things get so bad that suddenly people wake up and they start fighting back. We have hit that stage, and I am now optimistic that we're in the course of a counter revolution. I believe that I know the Harvard Board of Overseers has been meeting for the last 2 days to deal with the crisis. Suddenly they see that their president was unable to answer these fundamental free speech questions, and Harvard's getting slammed, and now there are going to be additional hearings. They are
Right.
going to be unhappy campers. And either they're going to get rid of Pauline Gay or they are going to convince her that she has to change her ways. She has to learn about this. She's president of a major university. She's going to have to learn about academic freedom. They all are going to have to learn about academic freedom. And so, one way or the other, this is a major turning point, I think.
Thank you so much for coming on. Really enlightening conversation. Don't want to take up too much of your time. So appreciate you very much. And keep fighting the good fight, my friend.
Going to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Am I released?
Yeah, you're released. You're good.
Okay, thank
Sorry.
you.
I thought that's my bad. Yeah. Just short today, I think. You know. But yeah, thank you so much again. It was great.
Righto.
Yeah. It's always an honor and a privilege to talk to people with that level of expertise. I had like an hour. If I wanted to, I could have pushed for another half hour. Maybe admin will get mad at me, but there wasn't much more to talk about. The fact of the matter is that it is bad on college campuses. He was focusing on racial epithets as being the main thing that get people in trouble. But he also agreed that people just having political opinions did it too. He wouldn't really elaborate on that. I suppose it's just because we all kind of know the type of stuff that'll get you in trouble. It's interesting. If I held up a sign that says "Men are not women," like on the central square of a college, and I did that like for 2 weeks as a student, I would probably get disciplined at some point. I'm pretty confident that would happen. So racial epithets are bad, but are also protected by free speech, and even stuff that the average person who's not ideologically committed to leftism, just political opinions, those can be qualified as hate speech too. And that's actually the real problem with hate speech. It's not the fact that there's standards. It's not the fact that people have moral standards beyond the First Amendment. That's actually good and actually, quite frankly, like necessary. Whether or not those should be enforced is a different question. I would argue, especially on college campuses, probably not. But the existence of cultural standards is good and important. The question is, what are those cultural standards? Because not all standards are equally good. And two, how do we define those standards? And the problem with hate speech is, one, a lot of the standards are bad. Like if you think that the statement "men are not women" is a type of hate speech, it's because you have bad standards for what hate speech is. But the second reason is because hate speech is just such a broadly amorphous category that you can put anything into. It doesn't mean anything. It means the stuff we think is bad at a given time with no principle beyond that. And to Mr. Silvergate's point, that's actually not good for the people it's allegedly protecting. Conservatives get a bad rap because conservatives talk at length about victimhood mentality and how it's all in your head. And to some extent, conservatives have overplayed their hand on that, especially right liberals have very much overplayed their hand on that. But it is true that if you get used to being coddled, if you get used to like not having to just deal with things, if you get used to having an external locus of control as opposed to an internal locus of control, that's bad for you. That makes you a worse person. It makes you less tough, which is necessarily worse. So, really brilliant conversation, really brilliant guy, interesting dude. So blessed that we could have him on. Very happy about it. And speaking of free speech, we do have one more story today. But first, we're going to finish up our GOP talking point. So, for those who don't know, Vivek Ramaswamy, he not only called Nikki Haley corrupt, he had a sign. And it was a sign that said Nikki Haley equals corrupt. I'm going to find it just for you because it was insane. It was absolutely insane, and I think it's just because it's the fourth debate, he just did not care. And I kind of appreciate that. I think it's funny. We are going to the video. Let's see. We love technical difficulties, don't we? Yeah. Okay, here's a clip. We're gonna play it, and then we'll talk about the real avatar for the free speech debate, which is our last news story of the week and certainly of the day. Look at that.
Woman can get this job done. That's what she said. After the third debate, when I criticized Ronna McDaniel after 5 failed years of leadership of this party and criticized
Side note, very real. Ronna McDaniel sucks at her job.
Nikki for her corrupt foreign dealings,
although she doesn't really have that much power. She's not exactly been effective.
Of this party and criticized Nikki for her corrupt foreign dealings as a military contractor. She said that I have a woman problem. Nikki, I don't have a woman problem. You have a corruption problem. And I think that that's what people need to know. Nikki is corrupt. This is a woman who will send your kids to die so she can buy a bigger house. This is the problem. Using identity politics more effectively than Kamala Harris is a form of intellectual fraud. And it actually needs to end. There's our donor puppet masters wielding their puppet right up here.
Okay. So that's insane. So there's like 50 different things that happen there. So a couple things. One, we'll start at the end. Vivek is channeling Trump. Trump did this in 2016 too. Trump said whenever he got booed, he said, "Look, it's their donors booing me because I'm attacking them," which is really very smart rhetorically, very genius move. Holding up the paper, it's just memeable. I think he could have made the point without it. He did it because he knew it would go viral. So smart again, Vivek. Clever girl, Vivek. Doing that. In terms of substance, he needed to do this, and the reason he needed to do this is not only because like Nikki Haley is like the avatar of the type of Republican that he's trying to distinguish himself from, but the other reason is because Nikki went after Vivek too. Like Vivek went hard in the paint in the first debate, and then everybody went after him hard. And Nikki said that he had a woman problem, which is, there's no evidence for that. So him fighting back against that, he wasn't able to fight back against it effectively in the debate where she said it, but hitting her back then, denying it, and then turning it around on her was a very good job. In terms of what I think of whether Nikki Haley is actually corrupt, I don't know what you mean by corrupt. I don't know what Vivek means. When he says that she was a congressperson and then all of a sudden she makes millions of dollars right after her career in public service. Obviously, somebody paid her a ton of money. Like, that is a good indication of potential corruption. That is a good reason to be suspicious. However, to say that her actions right now are dictated by that is kind of silly because Nikki Haley's been a hawk forever. Nikki Haley was a hawk well before she made those mills. So again, you can just say her policies are bad. Like, the corruption angle is smart and effective, especially when he says she'll go send your kids to die, which is also not very accurate because Haley has not called for actual boots on the ground yet. Again, yet would be the operative word for Vivek. He'd say that she would if given the chance at the slightest breath, although she hasn't done that right now. So again, like, not exactly a dead hit, again, because the corruption thing is edgy and whether or not she'd actually put boots on the ground is also edgy, but it's a very good way to knock down the idea of her. And this debate fundamentally did. So, speaking, there was other things in that debate that were interesting. There are other things in that debate that were interesting, although none are coming to mind. We did get cut off when we were talking to Mr. Silvergate. There was a moment where he white knighted, where Chris Christie white knighted for Nikki Haley, which I thought was very strange. He like leapt to her defense. Again, I think it's just because Vivek is very Trump-ish, so Christie was trying to distinguish himself there. I don't think he won any points. And Vivek's final point about how she wields identity politics was 100% right. Because one of the worst things Nikki Haley was done was talk about how, like, because she's a woman, she'll be a good president. Like, if you're telling this to the GOP, that is a horrible idea. The GOP hates that kind of stuff. The GOP hates identity politics. Say you're going to be the best at your job because you have good policies and you're competent. Saying that it's because you're a woman is just not something the GOP likes. And like, I can kind of forgive her because the first woman president, like, kind of appeal should theoretically be like somewhat appealing to women, even GOP women. But like, fundamentally, it's just a massive line of attack. So Vivek like just attacked her on everything. All at once in a very effective way. So that was insane. When that happened, I could not believe it. It was crazy. But back to free speech. We're talking to Silvergate, and our final news story of the day is a not very exciting statement about a very exciting human being. That is Alex Jones. So Alex Jones has been brought back to Twitter. Elon Musk, when he first bought Twitter, actually didn't bring back Alex Jones. And he got a lot of hate for that. And he had his reasons for that. But Alex Jones has now come back. He's gone on a media tour. For those who don't know, he fell even more out of favor with the. He fell even more out of favor because he had a theory that Sandy Hook was, faked in some way. And he's admitted since that he was wrong on that. But obviously, making that accusation towards even in the midst of the grief is obviously horrific. But he is finally coming back, and we've reignited this discussion about free speech. And if you want to know my take personally, I think that whether you agree or disagree with Alex Jones, you should want him back. And it was for the exact reason Silvergate was saying. It's not good to coddle yourself. That's actually a bad thing. It makes you weaker. It makes you less competent. If you disagree with Alex Jones, him going underground is not going to stop the spread of his ideas. If anything, it's going to make the people who follow him more paranoid because the censorship is in some ways a badge of honor. It's a badge of they're afraid of us because we're right. If you let him in the public square and his ideas can be taken down, sunlight is the best disinfectant. And that's assuming you disagree with him. If you do agree with him, obviously this is great, at least on just some things. You think this is good because it's less censorship. And it's good for true ideas not to be censored. Either way, I think that fundamentally, while I do not agree with Alex Jones on all things, I agree with him on some things. And even if I didn't, it's still good to let people with honestly held opinions, especially opinions from a guy that big, it is important to let them in the public square because he is in the public square. He already is. The internet is not a place that you can get rid of people. You're going to find him either anyway. So kicking him out isn't really useful. It doesn't actually silence him in any way. You can't kill ideas, to steal a fun movie and comic quote. Speaking of free speech, there's some people in my comment section exercising their free speech, which is very fun. None of them are substantive. Like, I'd love to respond, but it doesn't really look like there's anything, like any questions or anything like really worth responding to. No, I do this for free currently. This guy's really committed. This is very funny. I haven't talked about economics today. Yeah, very strange. Very, very strange. Yeah, interesting. Anyway, see, I like this actually. I enjoy the fact that they are talking because if they were not commenting these things, people wouldn't be able to evaluate their ideas, right? You wouldn't be able to decide whether or not you agree with them and decide whether or not they're good. Now, there are exceptions to this. I would say, I will say that you could probably find me some exceptions where I think that their existence in public life is negative. Although once you reach that point, you're kind of reaching the border of free speech, right? Because assuming that it's not a threat or it's not like threats and obscenity are not free speech, for example. And if you disagree with me, you need to read more. You need to do some research on your Supreme Court precedents and investigate a little bit more into common law and the philosophy behind that sort of stuff. And maybe you could still disagree, but what I'm saying is not unprecedented in terms of obscenity. But so there are some things that can be physically spoken that I don't think are protected by free speech, but there's nothing that is free speech that I think should be banned, right? It's like a category error. Um, so yeah, lots of insults in the comments. Very fun. Very fun. It's so interesting to me. I'm going to talk about this for a second. Um, I've never understood like the hate comments. These are my first hate comments, so like this is exciting for me. I've never understood why. I've never understood why. Like I've never met these people. They haven't heard anything. They've heard almost nothing that I believe, almost at all. Very limited. They know nothing about me personally. Just very angry. Honestly, I feel bad. To be honest, by the way, this is a good lesson for all of you. The proper response to the people who are acting poorly towards you is not anger. It's really pity, because if they're taking the time to, attack you, especially when they don't know you very well, it shows a level of kind of resentment and anger, like internally, that should really kind of make you feel more bad for them than angry, if anything. So that's a good lesson. That's a difficult lesson to learn, but it's an important one. Oh, here's one. Defamation isn't free speech either. That's true. If you are consciously lying about somebody with the purposes of hurting them, I agree. That's not free speech either. Also, being on, if you want to apply this to Alex Jones, it doesn't work, because I think you can make a real argument that Alex Jones believed it. I don't think he was defaming like Sandy Hook because because he just felt like it. I don't think that that's true. If you could provide evidence to me that Alex Jones was being intentionally defamatory, that's fine. But if you have an opinion that's wrong and is damaging, but it's one that you actually genuinely held and you said it because you believed it, even if you wound up being wrong, that's not defamation. But I do agree, consciously lying about people in order to hurt them does not qualify as free speech. 100% true. Being on a social media policy isn't a free speech issue. Yes, it is. And the reason why it is because I agree, private platforms are different from the government. Although that's actually kind of less true now. If anybody actually read the Twitter files, you will know that governments and big tech are in bed together constantly. Like the biggest story, massively blows out of the water, Watergate, is the fact that the federal government was telling Twitter to like discourage certain types of posts in the lead up to the 2020 election. That scandal is massive. The lack of attention it's gotten is unbelievable. It's insane. The federal government literally, using big tech as a proxy, literally suppressed politically protected speech in the run up to an election. Unbelievable. Massive scandal. One of the biggest scandals in American history, easily. And it got brushed under the rug in like 2 months. It was insane. But aside from that, even assuming that they are private, it still is a free speech issue, because while, yes, it's not free speech in the legal sense, it is culturally important. Like, aside from the legality, it's important that our cultural institutions, which include big tech platforms, it's important that they subscribe to the same values as the rest of the civilization. Because if you have free speech legally, but all of the avenues of using your free speech in a way that is equally effective to everybody else, let's say, if those are shut to you, that's massively damaging to the point of free speech, to the beneficial effects of free speech. If everybody who follows certain political lines gets a megaphone, and you don't get a megaphone because you have certain opinions that the people in power don't like, sure, you're allowed to talk, but if there's disproportionate, unfair, and biased distribution of megaphones, that's still negative to civilization. It's still negative to the potential benefits of free speech. Musk doesn't even believe in free speech. He bans people who criticize him. I'm not familiar. If that's true, that's bad. That's what I'd say. If that's true, that's bad. Larry actually has a question, which is brilliant. He actually has substance, so we're going to respond. How would you feel if you had a child killed at Sandy Hook and had to listen to Alex Jones say it was a conspiracy? I would feel very bad. If he was, I forget the details of the accusations, but if he was saying like I was a paid actor, I would hate that. That would be horrific. I would feel very, very bad about it. Obviously, that's horrible, but it's also not really relevant to what we're talking about. He thinks I'm antisocial. It's so cute. That's called capitalism, baby. I don't have to lose ad revenue just so you can be a troll on my own website. No, I'm not saying you don't have a right to do it. Although you could make the argument that once they start dealing with the federal government in the way that they are, they actually do have a legal obligation. But in terms of rights, sure. If you're a purely private entity and you are not being puppeted by the government in any way, which again does not apply to our big tech today because they are absolutely in debt with the government and therefore stuff applies. But let's hypothetical big tech scenario where you are totally private, completely separate from the government. Yeah, you're right. They do have a right to do it. 100%, but that doesn't mean it's good, and that doesn't mean that I can't say that it's bad, because it is bad. Very negative. I don't think that's good. I think Elon Musk should not ban people who criticize him just because they criticize him. I think that if you're a private person, you still have responsibilities. You still have responsibilities to do what's good for your culture, and you still have responsibilities to uphold the values of your civilization. And the more powerful you are, the more responsibility comes with that. Uh, you know, just just ripping off Spider-Man here. So yeah, you're right. They're allowed to. I just don't think it's good. There's a difference between there's three categories. There's what is good and what is honored, and then there what is negative and what is banned, and then there's a third category, which is what is permitted, which is stuff that's not necessarily good, but what is allowed. And private ownership doing bad stuff with their businesses would be in the permitted category. I agree it should be allowed, again, assuming they're not in bed with the government, because then the First Amendment applies. But which is again what happened. The government violated the First Amendment when they used big tech as a proxy. Uh, Most insane story. One of the most insane scandals in American history. I will never shut up about it. But assuming that they were private, yeah, they're allowed to, but that doesn't make it good. That doesn't make it good. Larry is talking about how like the woke military will end MAGA or something. I don't know. It's very entertaining. I get a little bit ADHD, so having kind of like the side entertainment while I'm also like talking about serious things is very beautiful for me. No, you are not writing hate comments, Hetchu. And I appreciate that. You are engaging me with substance, and that is brilliant. This is the war of ideas. The idea is that we're supposed to fight the ideas, not necessarily each other. Now, to some extent, that's not possible. If the ideas get fundamental enough, if the values are fundamental enough, this is why war exists. But in most cases, you can just attack ideas without attacking people. One of the people in my comments understands this, and is commenting substance, and we're talking about substance like civilized people. Another person in my comment section is just attacking me personally and attacking MAGA personally. Yeah, cold dead MAGA hands. You're a delight. Anyway, these are my first interactions with chat, so I'm very happy about this, unironically. Yeah, yeah. He called conservatives retarded, and that's a general statement not applied to me specifically. You see, that is the type of edge case that I am willing to say is okay. Although I will say, if you think conservatives are retarded, read The Conservative Mind by Russell Kirk. You will realize that you can disagree with them, but they are not stupid. Conservatives are not dumb. But many conservatives are dumb, but conservatism is not dumb. It's a pretty robust philosophy that's been around for a while. Maybe next time we do a show, I'll talk about what conservatism actually is. We'll do that next time. I think that'll be good. I think that might attract even more chat interaction, which would be my favorite thing. It would be my favorite thing. Civil war would not be my favorite thing. But if it has to happen, so it goes. Okay, I'm gonna let go here. This has been a longer show than normal. Thank you all so much for watching. We had a lot of news this week. I will not be back for a while. I think I have a guest next week. But then after that, I'm gone because you see, it is the holidays. So Merry Christmas, everybody. It's wonderful. And because it is the holiday season, it means I will be spending times that are important. I will be talking with friends and family instead of with randos online. As much as I love you all, even the ones who don't like me, I love you all. But unfortunately, I will not be talking to you during the holiday season. So when we come back, there will be potentially a dissertation on conservatism, and there will be the announcement of the thing replacing Royal Rumble. It's very exciting. So thank you all for watching, as always, and I will see. Hold on. See, they are dumb. They crash the economy every time they get elected. They believe in stupid things like Pizzagate. You know what's funny is that like Pizzagate has been having a renaissance of like mild evidence. Like I don't believe in Pizzagate exactly, but there are a couple of coincidences that are happening that are getting like kind of weird. Like the chief investigator in Pizzagate who said it was fake was like found with child porn, like for example. So like you understand, like I'm not saying I believe in Pizzagate. I haven't looked into it enough to have an opinion, but you do have to admit that when you see stuff like that, it's kind of understandable why people do believe in it. They don't even support the Constitution anymore. That's not true. Not if you're talking to actual conservative. Definitionally, conservatives believe in the Constitution. Crashing the economy every time they get elected. That's a misunderstanding of economics. I didn't fall for a conspiracy theory. I said that I'm sympathetic to it. There's a difference. There's a difference. I don't have an opinion. I haven't researched it. But when you see that kind of evidence, it's sympathetic, and I understand why people fall for it. These are pretty basic distinctions. I know like minor nuanced distinctions are difficult for people, but they do exist. And me saying that I understand how people believe in this versus saying I believe in this, those are very different things. But I understand why they get confused. Anyone who supports Donald Trump does not support the Constitution. Oh, that's so sad. Okay, well, that's unfortunate that you think that, because that's definitely not true. Somebody said, he said, like, could we potentially suspend the Constitution? And he meant it in a not literal way if you look at the context. But I don't also... Oh, I was trying to sign off. Do I have to do this now? I think I do. I think I have to argue with my chat now. This is the thing. See, I'm new. I'm new at this, so I don't always do all the things that disciplined streamers are supposed to do, which is, like, ignore chat. But yeah, so when he said, could we like theoretically suspend the Constitution, he was speaking on like a very specific issue of elections. And what he was trying to say, I think, or let me say this. There are multiple reasonable interpretations. There is a reasonable interpretation that he literally meant he just wanted to shred the Constitution. That is one interpretation. It is possible. It is possible that is what he meant. There's another possibility, which I think based on context, you can read to, which is he was saying that the election wasn't legitimate. He was saying that, yes, the Constitution says X, Y, Z, but the Constitution assumes the, votes being real, right? And so he's saying, in this case, the Constitution doesn't apply. There are two different ways of reading that. You can say he's literally wants to get rid of the Constitution or ignore it, or he can say he doesn't think the Constitution apply. Now, Donald Trump is really, really shit at being precise with his rhetoric. He really is. So for me, I always try to assume the best reasonable interpretation of what somebody is saying, even if a negative interpretation is also reasonably possible. And the reason why I'm doing that is because it allows for less resentment. It allows for steelmanning of your opponent. And the final reason is because Donald Trump generally hasn't expressed anti-Constitution sentiments, as far as I'm aware. Not actually. This example of suspending the Constitution was pretty isolated. So when you take it in the context of the situation, you take it in the context of the rest of his rhetoric, I think the idea that Donald Trump actually wants to get rid of the Constitution, I think it's a pretty far stretch. Is it possible? Sure. Is it a stretch? Yes. So conservatives who, to the actual claim, yeah, I know it is isolated. The other examples that you're speaking to are similarly not as strong as you think they are. But to the actual claim that all conservatives who like Trump don't care about the Constitution, that's very silly. Because one, some conservatives might not know that he said that. And two, those conservatives could have the more beneficent interpretation of Trump. So, the original claim that if you like Trump, it's because you hate the Constitution, you must hate the Constitution, is very silly. Because even if you believe that Trump did mean it in the negative get rid of the Constitution way, you cannot say that every conservative interpreted it that way. Okay, I'm not going to argue with chat anymore. But thank you, chat, for showing up. And hopefully we have more chat in the future. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been The War of Ideas. I'll see you all next time. Bye. Wait, hold on. It's going to be a really long one because I forgot to set up the technicalities. See you all next time. Bye.